At the beginning of love, well, how long does that last?
Welcome back to The Place of Places, a chapter-by-chapter analysis of William Saroyan's 1972 memoir, Places Where I've Done Time. Today, we turn our focus to Chapter 6, 1881, Broadway, San Francisco, 1938. Ah, love is in the air, or at least lust. In this chapter, 30-year-old William visits a woman at her apartment in San Francisco and admires how uncomplicated she is, letting him call on her at any time of night with the door unlocked and booze waiting. And there she was, large, well-made, honest, and smelling like all the rest of the truth of the human race in the world, that part of the truth that just isn't in anything other than a handsome and honest woman. Her apartment overlooks the Golden Gate Bridge, that wonderfully phallic symbol in this moment, when Saroyan takes a big swallow of booze, lights a cigarette, and heads into the woman's room. The building that stands there today was built in 1957 and consumed 1881 Broadway, but this is where he would have stood that night. The Victorian to the left of it at 1879, and those across the street might have been closer to the space Saroyan's lady friend lived in. He coyly introduces this place by explaining that he doesn't particularly enjoy reading about astonishing achievements with women that other writers boast of. But if you look at Saroyan's body of work, there's actually quite a lot about trysts with women, none of them astonishing. In fact, in many cases, the stories are heartbreaking tales of unrequited love or loveless nights with prostitutes. The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze from 1934 and Sons Come and Go, Mothers Hang In Forever from 1976 both include tales that bookend his experiences with brief romances throughout his life. To analyze this chapter is to dig a little into Freudian psychosexual psychology, which can be a controversial and outdated place to dig. But we'll take a small shovel and start the hole, and you can draw your own conclusions. Before marrying, Saroyan satisfied his lust with brief romances, one-night stands, and prostitutes. He didn't have very many long-term intimate relationships with women. One of his most intimate relationships was via correspondence, when the intimacy of the mind didn't overlap with the intimacy of the body. In The World of William Saroyan, written by Nona Balakian and published in 1998, Balakian reveals a little-known romance Saroyan had with the writer Sonora Babb. Balakian found a file in Saroyan's archives, then held at the Bancroft Library at UC Berkeley, that contained 34 letters to Babb from 1931 to 1941. William and Sonora mostly corresponded through letters and eventually met in person. Early on, she was in LA, he in San Francisco. Their letters discussed the literary scene and coming up as young writers together. Eventually, he declared his love for her and apparently even asked her to marry him. Babb didn't quite have the same feelings for William, however, and eventually married the cinematographer James Wong Howe, defying California's anti-miscegenation laws that refused to recognize their interracial marriage. Babb was a scriptwriter, novelist, short story writer, poet, and journalist who, like Saroyan, visited the Soviet Union in the 1930s and was disappointed with the Communist Party that she had once sympathized with. Once his epistolary relationship with Babb ended, the next big romance was Carol Marcus. When William met Carol in 1941, he was 33 and she was going on 17. He was ready for a family and wanted to make sure she could conceive before marrying her. And then, in 1943, Aram was born. To William, fathering a family was symbolic and incredibly significant. But we know his marriage to Carol ended poorly, and his relationship with his children was strained. He never married another woman after Carol. It's hard to know exactly how Saroyan felt about love. There was sometimes a disconnect between what he wrote and how he lived. His son Aram described life after his divorce from Carol as belonging to the threat-free, almost impersonal domain of the call girl. In his memoir, Last Rites, Aram claims that being orphaned at 3, William's emotional development was arrested, and that he was never able to form intimate relationships in his life. That's perhaps beyond our scope, but we do know that Saroyan loved women. In Saroyan's writing, he frequently describes his worship of womankind. This is in his fiction and nonfiction. Sons Come and Go, Mothers Hang In Forever has quite a few references to Saroyan's relationship to women as a young man. He writes about passing by prostitutes when he was a newsboy in Fresno. You sold papers to men, not women. You hustled men. You admired women. You revered, you loved them. And I tended to worship the girls I wanted to love, and this made trouble for me. His adoration of women led to disappointment when women didn't notice him or see him equally as a god to their goddess. He was like a Valentino without the confidence. In the story And Man, in the Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze collection, the narrator, a teenage boy, admires a classmate. I looked at this girl, whom I loved so much, and I saw that she too was laughing, but I would not believe it. This sometimes happens. It happens when a man has given another person his own dignity and meaning, and the other person has not acquired that dignity and meaning. I saw and heard the girl laughing at me, but I would not believe it. I hadn't intended to entertain her. I hadn't intended to entertain anyone, and the laughter made me angry. He dreamed of the perfect woman, but she never materialized. Sometimes he would briefly fall in love with a call girl, one of whom one night seemed so beautiful that I was plunged into despair about human life itself, and about the position of women in the world, and into mourning for the loss of the girl I had been seeking all my life. This true love is always an unattainable dream in his stories. The story Love, in the Daring Young Man collection, is about a couple of men who step into a brothel to get out of the rain, where they are entertained by desperate young women. The protagonist, Pat, starts to feel emotional about one of the girls and wants to rescue her. This idea of rescuing call girls shows up in many of Saroyan's stories, and of course, there's the beloved hooker with a heart of gold, Kitty Duvall, from The Time of Your Life. Ultimately, he is always unable to save them, but these women were of great interest to Saroyan. Balakian claims that early on, passion in Saroyan's work has less to do with sexuality than Platonic humanism, and that when sex does appear in his stories, it's a banal physical manifestation that takes the form of sheer lust. She calls this his idealized harlot, a social human scar that arouses compassion but leaves no tangible residue of a relationship behind. This Platonic humanism may include Saroyan's desire to be a patriarch. A man with many powerful matriarchs in his life, he may have wanted to play a role that he never had in his life. In Sons Come and Go, he writes, "The hell with Christianity, America, monogamy, and all the rest of that baloney. I want a lot of women pregnant by me, so that my sons and my daughters will be the whole human race." When it comes to Balakian's idealized harlot, this is evident in his prostitute characters, but also as the female characters who seduce the male protagonists, making them lose their minds with hopes and expectations, and then the relationships fizzle. Two examples include the stories 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Love Here's My Hat, both written in the 1930s, and both about intense romances that drive the male protagonists crazy. In the case of the former, the hope and expectation of having a house and a life with a woman he barely knows fades and leaves him in emotional shambles. In the case of Love Here's My Hat, a passionate romance makes the lovers sick until they can only contain themselves by being apart. Rarely is there a story in Saroyan's oeuvre where love is simple and satisfying. But that's the history of love songs and love stories. They don't tend to focus on healthy relationships. This chapter has a different tone than some of the others. sort of confessional. I will only remark that there was this woman I enjoyed sleeping with in her apartment in San Francisco, and then I will go about my business, which is simply to remember places in which a sense of reality came to me that impelled me to feel great. Let's put this place on the Saroyan map and move on.